Hello and welcome to our series of videos on ease of use. The first video we're going to be looking at today is our Gathering Link Intelligence video. So let's start by giving you a little bit of context here. The customer that we're going to be working with has 3 internet links. 2 of those are going to be DSLs and 1 of those is going to be a cable connection. And we're going to bond all of those together to get the total bonded aggregate. And what we need to do, what this first video is going to show us, is what these advertised link speeds are actually going to do in the real world and where the saturation point is going to be hit, so that we know exactly what these lines are capable of before we go and we put them in a bond. What we're going to see is we're going to see the multiplied dashboard. We're going to see the built-in speed test tool so that we can tell what the legs are doing, and we're then going to be able to understand where the transmission limit of each connection is, so where we actually hit that breakage or saturation point. This is a really important piece of building our bond because we really want to understand what our legs are capable of doing on their own before we put them into a bond. So here we are in our management interface. This is a web-based GUI that's kind of a command and control for everything that's going on with the bonds. Now, the first thing I want to go over here is the concept of knowing exactly what your legs are doing versus the advertised bandwidth of what we think the legs should be able to do. This is a very important concept when it comes to building a bond. We need to be able to set the high water mark and let the bonding technology know that no matter what, this is the top clean range of this line before we start to see breakage, and there's no point in trying to go any faster. And when we get that information, what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and we're going to enter it into our leg information itself so that we know that we've established a good clean starting point for the bond. Now there's lots of command line utilities that you can use to accomplish this, but we were really passionate about developing something that was easy and quick to use to help you provision up your bonds with the most accuracy and the least amount of time and effort. So we went and we built the speed test interface, and let me just run through what a typical test would look like. Now, as I've mentioned, we're pretty far from the CO here, and the 2 DSL lines we have are really not that strong. So let me go and pick on the weakest of the 2, leg 51, currently in ETH1, and I'm going to run a quick TCP download test. I'm not going to rate limit it at all. I'm going to give it 5 seconds to run. I'm going to add some concurrency to make sure I really maximize the bandwidth in that pipeline, and I'm going to go and I'm going to hit test. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this leg out of the bond and it's going to push it as hard as it possibly can to find that point where this line breaks. So the results we get back are about what I would expect. We hit about 2.5 megs on our 6 meg DSL line. We've got some packet loss in there that's not great, but what I'm really concerned about is this latency. 250 milliseconds of average latency on my DSL line is not what I want to see. I can also see down here on the latency graph that the latency is really all over the place. So I'm pretty sure I've now pushed this line to the point where it's broken, and I need to go back and rerun this test a few times, now adding a little bit of rate limiting in, starting around 2.5, so that I can see exactly where this line breaks and know that that's the good point where I want to put this line into the bond, and then we know exactly what this line can do, and that will help us set our bond up. So now that I have that initial result, I can go back into the speed tests, and as I was previously saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to run some concurrent tests you can see here in small increments with different levels of rate limiting. And when I'm done, I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of results here. And what I can do with those results is I can select them all, and once they're selected I can hit compare tests. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me a nice graph here. And what I can do is I can follow along with my rate limiting along the bottom so that I can see where the latency is stable and then where it starts to increase, and I know that that's the point where I've hit breakage and that that's the point where I should really try to avoid pushing the line any higher then. Now the important thing to note here is that the latency is stable and the throughput is still going up, but right at the point in time where the latency goes into a really bad state, the throughput is no longer increasing. So I know that right there is the sweet spot of the high point where I want to set that line when I put it into the bond.